This BBC presenter scandal. A big problem with it is I can't talk about it in the way I would like to talk about it. There's elements of the story that I know about which I'm unable to talk about for legal reasons. The accused still has their anonymity. So I'm going to try and talk about it as best I can because I'm not comfortable with the direction this is going. I'm not prejudging any possible outcome. We don't know what the outcome will be, but the narrative is troubling, and we're going to go into that. Now, for those who, for whatever reason, are not familiar with this story, the Sun newspaper last week reported a senior BBC presenter, a male presenter, had spent £35,000 on pictures of a sexual nature with a young adult who is now 20 years old, but that contact began when that young adult was 17 years old. Now, for those who don't know, while the age of consent for sex in Britain is 16, it's illegal to receive pictures of a sexual nature to distribute those images under the age, if those involved are under the age of 18, so 16 to 17-year-olds. Quite interesting for the Sun to take a big moral stand on this, but given that they used to plaster topless pictures of girls under the age of 18, images which, if they were now on your hard drive, could make you liable for having committed a serious sexual offence in this country, and indeed open the possibility of a custodial sentence. Now, the claims are that the mother and stepfather of the young adult made contact with the BBC back in May, but that no action was taken, as they saw it, in that the presenter remained on air. Now, they claim that money from the presenter, and we're talking about 35 grand here, you have to ask questions about that amount of money. £35,000 for pictures. There's no claim that there was any meeting ever between the young adult and this male presenter. £35,000 for pictures. Gotta have to ask questions there, haven't you? But the claims are that that money was used by the young adult to fund a crack addiction, and that the motive of the mother and the stepfather was to get those cash payments to stop. Now, the mother claimed that the presenter has taken my child's innocence. Again, we need to emphasise, this person is now 20 years old. That is a young adult, obviously 17. If pictures were distributed at that age, that is a criminal offence, but now we're talking about a 20-year-old. She says she's seen evidence of cash payments and a still of the BBC presenter stripped down to the underpants. The claims are from the mother and the stepfather that, unsatisfied with the BBC response, they took the story to the Sun. Now, the fact the Sun didn't name the presenter is itself interesting. Now, that lots of people have pointed to supposedly suffocating nature of privacy laws in Britain, particularly in the wake of Cliff Richard, who had false accusations which did not result in any charges, any convictions. And then the BBC sent a helicopter around Cliff Richard's property and all the rest of it, and Cliff Richard was successful in action in the aftermath. So therefore you get the idea is suffocating privacy laws where you can't name individuals embroiled in these sorts of scandals. But if the Sun had a cast iron case in which they were absolutely sure of guilt, I don't believe for one second that those laws would prevent them from naming the individual in question. Because this male presenter was not named, that triggered the mother of online witch hunts. It was gruesome stuff in which a load of BBC presenters who'd done nothing wrong were libelled, defamed by anonymous, or people using their own names, Twitter accounts, which was obviously extremely traumatic. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see significant libel actions taken against some of those users in the aftermath. But then you see there was a whopping big development, because a letter was sent by the young person's lawyer which declared, for the avoidance of doubt, nothing inappropriate or unlawful has taken place between our client and the BBC personality, and the allegations reported in the Sun newspaper are rubbish. They said the statement made by the mother was totally wrong and there was no truth to it. This lawyer also claims that the press reporting amounted to invasion of privacy, criticising both the Sun and the BBC for not contacting their client. Nobody from the Sun newspaper appears to have made any attempt to contact our client prior to the publication of the allegations on Friday the 6th of June. And a key claim is that the young person contacted the Sun on Friday to deny the story in advance of publication, and that this denial wasn't included. Well, that is surely, if true, a scandalous failure of journalistic standards. Because, of course, this is a young adult, it's not a child, 20 years old. This adult could, obviously should have had their side of the story included. So why didn't they include that denial? They could go ahead with the story, the allegations made by the mother and the stepfather, but how can they omit the counterclaim of the actual person? Well, not quite as shocking a story then, is it? Here's a series of claims about a young adult, and the young adult denies it. Now, crucially, the lawyer also claims that the mother and the young adult are estranged. That's an important detail. Now, Sun hit back, claiming they reported a story about two very concerned parents who made a complaint to the BBC in the behaviour of the presenter and the welfare of their child. Their complaint was not acted on by the BBC, and they claim they've seen evidence that supports those concerns. It's now for the BBC to properly investigate. And in a new interview, the mother and the stepfather said they stand by their claims. But you see, there are some interesting developments, because the major hug of the original story centred on allegations of illegality, a 17-year-old being paid to send pornographic images. That is illegal, as I've said, under British law. But the father told the son yesterday, I told the BBC I had gone to the police in desperation, but they couldn't do anything, as they said it wasn't illegal. They knew all of this. But that's a pretty big deal, that, isn't it? That particular point. Because if photos were exchanged at the age of 17, that is illegal. If the police decide there was no illegality, then how can those two things be true? Now, the police have told the BBC to pause inquiries while they decided there's justification for criminal investigation. Maybe contact was made at the age of 17, but no such images were exchanged. That's one possibility. We need to know what the circumstances of this contact being made actually were. So we'll see what transpires. What we do know is a complainant contacted the BBC in May. It was passed on to the corporate investigations team of the BBC, who concluded it didn't include an allegation of criminality, but did merit more investigation. They then emailed the complainant, but got no response. A phone call was made, but the call didn't connect. It was July the Sun informed the BBC of allegations, and then in July the BBC was sent materials related to the complaint. Now, as to what evidence the BBC has, as Sky News' Matthew Thompson says, having sifted through the Sun's coverage, he said, I can't see any clear statement they've actually seen any of the evidence themselves. He says, even the writer with the dossier is oddly phrased. The family handed a dossier of evidence. Did the Sun review it? What was in there? Then the next line is just a claim about underage payments. Is there proof? Why isn't the dossier on a double-page spread? Now, the former editor of the Sun, David Yelland, also made the point about the bank statements. Where are the bank statements? Why aren't they being included in the coverage? And David Yelland has raised questions about what evidence his former newspaper has when it comes to this. So the Sun clearly needs to come clean about what evidence they've seen in full, and we have to wait and see until the police have decided whether to pursue a criminal investigation. But a new development today, troubling me further about the direction of this story. This is about a young adult in their early 20s contacted anonymously by this male presenter on a dating app. They said they were put under pressure to meet up and never did. Then this young adult hinted online they might name the presenter and were sent abusive, expletive-filled messages, which the BBC has seen, and they were frightened as a result. Now, the BBC verified that the messages came from the presenter in question because they checked the phone number they were sent from. So in other words, this young adult didn't just speak to the presenter on the dating app, they voluntarily exchanged numbers and carried on the conversation via text message or WhatsApp. Now, I want to know what pressure to meet means, because this really is very, very important. What seems to be coming from these messages is a potential threat, or hint of a threat, from the young adult to publicly reveal the identity of the BBC presenter with lifelong changing consequences, triggering an angry response, publicly tweeting that they were, or well, it was on some social media account, maybe it was Instagram, but publicly posting that they were minded in some way to expose the identity of the presenter. That is an important detail, and the circumstances of that need to be obviously analysed. What were the contents of the messages, so we know what constituted pressure to meet up? What does that actually mean? Now, there's much we can't say about the story as things stand, but I'm not comfortable with the direction, to say the least. I don't trust the Sun newspaper for various reasons, including, of course, their relationship to the BBC, or what they would like to do with the BBC. Rupert Murdoch would obviously like to get rid of the BBC. I don't think that's particularly a secret. I don't like the use of young person, or the way young or child keeps being used, as if we're talking about kids. There's a question mark over whether, as I've said, that there were images of a sexual nature when the first young adult was 17. That's what needs to be investigated. But the other one, we're talking, that person's now 20, the other person's in their early 20s when contact began. That doesn't mean the behaviour of the accused is right. We don't know what that behaviour is. There are shades, aren't there? But that doesn't necessarily mean legal wrongdoing. Now, sunshine is the best disinfectant. My own view, it's easy for me to say this, isn't it? But the presenter should come forward. That can't be easy. He's got a family. This must be hellish to be in the middle of this, whatever the truth of the matter is. Or, I'm not going to say, he's necessarily a victim or martyr. It depends on what he's done. But otherwise, it's likely there will be other claims that will emerge and a narrative will become fixed. At least this time, they can put their narrative forward and we can discuss these claims openly and put them in the right context. As you can see, or as you can hear, I haven't been able to do that properly. But I think it'd be odd if I didn't talk about the story, given it's the biggest story in the country at the moment, and I think it's going to run and run. But I'm very, very unsettled and disturbed by where this is heading. And I think we need evidence, we need clarity, and we need openness, because I think this could be quite a significant story in lots of ways, and we need to discuss that. Please like, subscribe, do support us on patreon.com/ownjoes84. I'll see you in a bit.